name's Stuart Scott and welcome to the 7th virtual walking tour of Magical London. We've now completed all 6 tours set out in Bob Reed's Magical London. Those walks were strolling in St James, taking in Piccadilly and Pall Mall. Let's all go down the Strand, from Victoria via the Strand to Blackfriars. Doing the Lambeth Walk, starting out at Waterloo and exploring Lambeth before arriving at the Tate Britain. Great Scott Walk, heading up from Elephant and Castle to the South Bank before heading to the Tower of London and Tower Bridge. Fair Game Walk, taking us from the Barbican to Smithfield, St Paul's and the Guildhall. And finally, Hello Central, a trek from BBC Broadcasting House to Piccadilly Circus, then via Leicester Square to Covent Garden. A few people have noted that none of these tours take in the Magic Circle's headquarters, the Centre for the Magic Arts at 12 Stevenson Way. Now this 7th tour has been designed to address that point. While this tour is not one of Bob's, it's inspired by his work and it's very much in the spirit of the other tours. So today we're walking the Magic Mile. That's the portion of Euston Road that lies between Kings Cross Station and the Magic Circle. This tour takes us from Houdini's first London home to the British Museum via Conway Hall and a couple of famous magic dealers, through Bloomsbury to King's Cross and then along Euston Road to the Magic Circle. We'll hear about the first magicians in history and some modern stars. We'll see Houdini at different points in his life and we'll hear about his friendship with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. We'll see how magicians help with rational thinking and investigate the paranormal. We'll visit a famous hospital, we'll meet the boy who lived, and we'll visit the House of 10,000 Secrets. As ever, I'll be using photos, videos, maps and Google Street View to take you around a virtual London. Today's tour starts here, at Tottenham Court Road Tube Station. So let's see where we are on the map. Here you can see an image of London and we're going to zoom into this part, which is the kind of Bloomsbury area and around Bloomsbury. And you can see our start point right here at Tottenham Court Road. Now behind me you can make out the Dominion Theatre. This theatre was built in 1928 and it's been home to theatre shows and cinema. The first movie to be screened here was The Phantom of the Opera on the 21st of July 1930, and in the audience was one Herbert George Wells, better known as H.G. Wells, the famous science fiction author. Wells' particular brand of magic was clever and thought-provoking science fiction. He's known for classics including The Time Machine, The Invisible Man and The War of the Worlds. While H.G. Wells is not known to have been a magician, he certainly wrote about magic, including his short story The Magic Shop, written in 1903. It's a fantasy piece about a boy who wants his father to take him to a magic shop on Regent Street and the strange, creepy goings-on in the shop. Imagine, if you will, a traditional magic show seen through the eyes of a science fiction writer. Besides his works of fiction, Wells is known for Wells's law, a notion that a science fiction story should only contain a single extraordinary assumption, much like a piece of strong magic. In his introduction to a collection of his works published in 1934, he says, "As soon as the magic trick has been done, the whole business of the fantasy writer is to keep everything else human and real. Any extra fantasy outside the cardinal assumption immediately gives a touch of irresponsible silliness to the invention." The Dominion Theatre was also joint home to the premiere of the original Star Wars movie along with the Leicester Square Theatre, and later it was here where they held the premiere for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but we'll touch on those a bit later, because it was also in this theatre that they hosted the auditions for Britain's Got Talent. As a result of strong public demand and a not insignificant amount of skill, Britain's Got Talent has become a beacon for strong magic. We've seen a host of great modern magicians, from Mark Spellman, both as himself and as his alter ego X, Mandy Muden, Magical Bones, Colin Cloud, Richard Jones and Ben Hart, to name just a few. We now head up Tottenham Court Road and we're going to take a right onto Torrington Place. And just along on the left, this is Cheney's Mews, and this was formerly the home of the Magic Circle. Here's our route on the map. 84 Cheney's Mews, Torrington Place, was the home of the Magic Circle from January 1968 to September 1988. In February 1967, Magic Circle members John Solis and Geoffrey Robinson completed negotiations with the student Christian movement for the rent of a premises, a former badminton court. It would provide accommodation for a club room, library and a 120-seater theatre. An appeal raised £7,000 for renovations. I should point out that around this time close-up magic was becoming popular in the UK. The Magic Circle ran its first close-up competition in 1967, and our very own Bob Reed, inventor of these tours, was the first winner. The week Cheney's Mews opened to the Magic Circle in January 1968 had a different celebrity visiting each day. The official opening was an evening dress function conducted by Earl Mountbatten. Mountbatten was also present when Prince Charles, now King Charles III, did his audition to join the Magic Circle in Cheney's Mews in 1975. A library was added in late 1968. Illusionist Robert Harbin devised a zodiac optical illusion for the foyer. Unusual half steps were installed to provide access to the library, and a huge zodiac was laid on the clubroom floor. While at times the Circle looked at buying the lease, these hopes floundered. A key ambition was to find a permanent home for the Magic Circle. During this period, the Magic Circle continued the tradition of being a typical London gentleman's club, meaning no women. Attempts were made to change this rule. In March 1972, a young lady wrote to the Magic Circular complaining about the injustice to her sex and how it had weakened her resolve to ask her parents to buy her a magic set for Christmas. She added as a postscript, "If your reply is not favourable to me, I shall have to consider joining Women's Lib and burn my bra in protest when I'm old enough to wear one." A few months later, a 23-year-old female magician called Diane Matthews made such a symbolic and incendiary gesture in Cheney's Mews outside the headquarters, and it attracted considerable publicity. Alas, she was not successful in swaying the council of the Magic Circle. The news, well, the Daily Mail, reported that one trick that magician Diane Matthews cannot do is become a member of the exclusive Magic Circle. David Nixon, the famous television magician, said he was in favour of women joining. When asked about Diane's bra-burning trick, he asked, did she manage to restore it afterwards? Diane Matthews, born around 1949, was from Ash Vale near Aldershot. At the time of her protest, she had been a magician for 4 months and had hoped that membership of the Magic Circle might help her increase her income as a magician and would be a good place for her to learn from other magicians. She performed as Diane the Seductive Sorceress with an act that combined delicate magical effects with sophisticated modern dance. 3 years later, the Daily Express seemed to relish in the fact that Diane's fight to join the Magic Circle had been fruitless and she was now getting married. The article refers to the Magic Circle headquarters being in Chelsea, a clear journalistic failing mixing up Cheney's, Chenie's Mews, with Cheney, Cheyne Mews in Chelsea. Diane was quoted to say, "I have been given the most frivolous reasons for being cold-shouldered. They claim women cannot keep secrets." In January 1976, the Sex Discrimination Act became law. At this time, Maureen Vickers, wife of a Magic Circle member and an award-winning magician in her own right, with the International Brotherhood of Magicians, somewhat ironically, applied for membership. The application was refused on the grounds that it was a private members' club and did not have to admit ladies. The case eventually went to an industrial tribunal, and in 1977 it found that as a private club, the Magic Circle was not subject to the new law. The ruling emphasised that until such a time as the members voted to allow women to join, the status quo would remain. In 1989, in what was described as a major to-do and a major ta-da, the 5'2", young-looking 18-year-old Raymond Glyn Lloyd of Hazelmere, Surrey, applied for associate membership and was admitted. As for any member, Raymond had to do a 20-minute magic performance, and this was followed by a 1.5-hour chat with the examiner over a pint. Raymond's audition was successful and he became an associate member. Raymond Lloyd was in fact 28-year-old Sophie Lloyd masquerading as a man. She wasn't even a magician. She had been taught by magician Jenny Winstanley, enabling Lloyd to pull off the performance. She had also prepared a clear backstory about how Raymond got into magic through children's books as a boy. Winstanley had met Sophie Lloyd 4 years earlier and realised that Sophie, while not into magic, was a great actress. Winstanley took it upon herself to direct Lloyd and prepare her for applying. No one else knew Lloyd's true identity, Winstanley had wanted to be the first female member of the circle, but felt that Sophie could do it for her. Finally, in 1991, the membership voted to admit women. At this point, Raymond Lloyd confessed to being Sophie Lloyd, and the story was covered in the papers. Rather than be impressed by the deception, the Council of the Magic Circle kicked her out. When the club voted to admit women, Paula Bard was immediately elected as an honorary member, and 1 year later 19 women had been able to join. In 1932, 12-year-old schoolgirl Paula Bard from Hastings came second in a talent contest for young conjurers organised by the Masculines at St George's Hall. She became interested in magic when she received a magic set intended for her brother. She also made headlines by becoming the youngest girl to fly an aeroplane in England. By the time she was 19, she was good enough and old enough to join the Second World War ENSA, Entertainment's National Service Association, Girls in Uniform Troupe. She entertained the troops in the Western Desert from 1941 until the end of the war, manipulating billiard balls and other objects. Everything was carried in her neat handbag, and her strapless gown disproved the myth that it was all up her sleeves. She was a FISM winner in 1948, often called the Magic Olympics, and while not a member of the Magic Circle, she did a lot of shows for them and received the coveted silver wand. She was grateful to the Magic Circle for the help it provided over the years and made it clear that it was the only magic society she ever wanted to join. In the year after Paula Bard became an honorary member, 19 other women joined the Magic Circle. One of the first to apply was the lovely Debbie McGee. Debbie McGee, born in Kingston-upon-Thames, won a place at the Royal Ballet School at the age of 16 and went on to work for the Iranian National Ballet Company in Tehran, a career that was brought to an abrupt end by the Iranian Revolution. When she returned to England, she found a job performing on stage with magician Paul Daniels at the Britannia Pier Theatre in Great Yarmouth. She worked in a dance troupe which toured Europe with acts like Chris de Burgh and James Last, and then joined Paul Daniels again in his 1980 summer season in Bournemouth, before performing in his London stage show It's Magic, which opened on the 10th of December 1980 and ran for 14 months, the longest running magic show ever to play in the West End. She became a regular feature on the Paul Daniels Magic Show on BBC, which ran from 1979 to 1994. She and Paul would marry in April 1988. In 2017, she was the recipient of the Magic Circle's Masculine Award for services to British magic. Debbie continues to make regular TV appearances. Another one of the first women to join the Magic Circle and be made an honorary member of the Inner Magic Circle was Charlotte Pendragon of the Illusion Act, the Pendragons. Charlotte Ann Brown was born in Montana. She met her future husband Jonathan when they were studying at the University of California. She was a dancer, former gymnast, and bodybuilder. Together they created the Pendragons, an illusion act that was performed with explosive power and dynamism. They found their way into the Guinness Book of World Records under the heading of the fastest transformation illusion. They appeared on NBC's World's Greatest Magic and on Thames TV's The Best of Magic. Charlotte was the first woman to receive the Magician of the Year award from the Academy of Magical Arts at the Magic Castle. And Charlotte premiered a solo act in 2009 at the Daytona Festival of Magic. Another of the first women to join the Magic Circle was Janet Clare. She campaigned for the society to open up to women. She was also the first woman to be elected to the Magic Circle Council, and she would go on to serve as examination secretary and receive the coveted silver wand for outstanding services to the club. Another of the 19 women to join the Magic Circle as soon as permitted was the legendary Fay Presto. Fay played a key role in the evolution of close-up magic in the UK, particularly table hopping in restaurants. She continues to work in several of London's top venues. As well as her regular residency work in London, Fay has appeared on stage and TV. She even got to play herself in an episode of Emmerdale. She's a favourite of celebrities, with Paul McCartney at a Buckingham Palace engagement no less, blurting out, "Fay Presto, you are a fucking genius." She is perhaps best known for her signature trick, Bottle Through Table, which was voted one of the 50 greatest tricks of all time. In the magic community, Fay is an outspoken advocate for female representation. She is known for being the first to greet new magicians at the Magic Circle and make them feel at home. She's also played a role in mentoring stars like Laura London and encouraging Megan Swan to run for Magic Circle Council roles. In 2023, Faye's contributions were recognised when she received the Masculine Award for services to British magic. We now head on to Gower Street, and we're going to head along until we get to Keppel Street. Now at the end of the street we can see the imposing Senate House of the University of London Union. This is home to the Harry Price collection. Harry Price was born in 1881 in London. He was an expert amateur magician and a collector of magic books, but predominantly known as a psychic researcher and author. He gained public prominence for his investigations into psychic phenomena and exposing fraudulent spiritualist mediums. He claimed to have had his first psychical experience at the age of 15. His interest in psychical research led him to make a point of exposing as many frauds and tricksters as he could. He spent years conducting experiments to show how mediums and their assistants could falsify spirit photographs, trances, the appearance of familiars, and messages from the dead. He joined the Magic Circle in 1922 and maintained a lifelong interest in stage magic and conjuring. His expertise in sleight of hand and magic tricks made him ideally suited to investigate claims of the paranormal. His first major success was in 1922 when he exposed the spirit photographer William Hope. He joined the Society of Psychical Research but quickly made enemies among the members due to his strong personality and talent for self-promotion. Harry convinced the University of London to grant him space for a national laboratory of psychical research, although it would never actually sit under the university's auspices. Not that that would deter Harry Price from claiming the organisation was part of the university. Price would study purported psychics and mind readers. Price saw Erich Jan Hannessen, an occultist to high-level Nazis, who may have predicted the Reichstag fire. Hannessen had an unusual semi-contact technique involving a gold ball. Before he could be brought to Price's lab for investigation, he was murdered in 1933. Others, like Dutch opera singer turned mind reader Malowitz, refused to subject themselves to Price's lab studies without payment. In his career, he investigated a German who claimed to use black magic to turn a goat into a man. He looked into the Indian rope trick, fire walking, mind reading, psychic phenomena, and ghost sightings. Price is perhaps best known for his research into Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England. Borley Rectory seemed to defy Harry Price's attempts to expose fraud, or else he succumbed to the lure of the fame and publicity which accompanied his work there. Some even accused him of instigating some of the supposed ghostly pebble-throwing and brick-hurling episodes. Harry Price built up a unique library of materials on all aspects of parapsychology and related fields during his lifetime. Despite a sometimes uncomfortable relationship with the University of London, he left the entire collection to the Senate House Library behind me. Harry Price is not the only magical Harry related to this location though. It was here, at number 10 Keppel Street, that Harry Houdini first lived when he arrived in London in 1900. Harry Houdini was the stage name of Hungarian-American magician and escapologist Erich Weiss. Born in 1874 in Budapest, Harry grew up in the American Midwest. His performance career started at the age of 9 as a trapeze artist, but he started performing magic in 1891, initially focusing on card tricks and billing himself as the King of Cards. He adopted the name Harry Houdini after reading the autobiography of the great French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. Houdini was Houdin plus an I, which in Hungarian means belonging to. The name Harry was a homage to the great American magician of the era, Harry Keller, but equally it was likely to be adapted from Eri, a contraction of his birth name, Erich, who would perform in the early 1890s with his brother Theodore as the Brothers Houdini for near-starvation wages. In 1895, he met his wife-to-be, Bess Rayner. Soon she would replace Theodore, and the act would become known as the Houdinis. His big break came in 1899 when he impressed manager Martin Beck with a handcuff act and got booked on the vaudeville circuit. It was in 1900 that he moved here to London. Bloomsbury was a popular haunt for Americans coming to London. At this point in his life, Houdini had yet to make a major impact in America, and instead opted to first make a name for himself in Europe. But initially, Harry struggled to get a theatrical agent interested in his handcuff routine. Things changed for Harry on the 13th of June 1900 when the manager of the Alhambra on Leicester Square, now the large Odeon Cinema, offered him a contract on the condition that he must first escape from handcuffs at Scotland Yard. The legend goes that Houdini met Superintendent William Melville of Scotland Yard. Melville ridiculed the idea of an escape from regulation handcuffs. Within seconds, he grabbed Houdini's arms, encircled them around a nearby pillar, produced some cuffs and snapped them around Harry's wrists. Melville explained that he'd come back for Houdini in a couple of hours. "I'll go with you," said Houdini as the cuffs fell to the floor. We're now going to continue to the end of Keppel Street, and then we're going to head south along Mallet Street. And we arrive at Montague Place. Now at number 23 Montague Place was where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle lived, and it was here that magician P.T. Selbert staged a séance for Doyle. Selbert would claim that Doyle was completely taken in by the faux séance. Doyle would later say, "I should have to see it again before passing a definitive opinion on it, and I have my doubts about the whole thing." P.T. Selbert was the stage name of Percy Thomas Tibbles, who was born in 1881. He developed an interest in magic in his youth. He apprenticed with a silversmith whose basement happened to be leased to the magician Charles Morritt. When Morritt was away, Tibbles would sneak in to study his tricks. Between 1902 and 1908, he worked under the name Joad Heteb, a pseudo-Egyptian character donning grease paint, robes and a wig when performing. He created a trick called the Mighty Cheese, in which audience members would try unsuccessfully to topple a huge circular model of a cheese wheel. It proved impossible, as it had a gyroscope inside. He created his stage name by spelling Tibbles in reverse. Selbert would work at the Egyptian Hall and St George's Hall for John Neville Maskelyne and David Devant. He developed the walking through a wall illusion in 1913, which Houdini would perform a year later in New York. Selbert's friends would claim Houdini had stolen the illusion, while Houdini claimed he had bought the rights from the actual owner, Sidney Josseline. Selbert claimed to be the originator. On 17th of January 1921, Selbert would make history by performing his new illusion, sawing a woman in half. It was displayed at the Finsbury Park Empire Theatre. While much copied, it has become a classic of magic and is still performed over a century later. We're now going to head back onto Gower Street, and then we turn left and we're going to head past Bedford Square and onto Bedford Avenue. Now this is where we find Bedford Court Mansions, and this was another one of Houdini's London homes. In the 1911 telephone directory it reads Houdini, Harry, Handcuff King, 84 Bedford Court Mansions. The rest, as they say, is history. After his success with Melville, Houdini was booked for 6 months at the Alhambra. His show was an immediate hit and his salary rose to $300 a week, almost $10,000 or £8,000 in modern money. Between 1910 and 1920, Harry would appear in theatres all over Great Britain, performing escape acts, illusions, card tricks and outdoor stunts. He also accepted challenges to escape from cuffs and sealed boxes. He became one of the highest paid entertainers. He went on tour to the Netherlands, Germany, France and Russia. In each city, Houdini would challenge local police to restrain him with shackles and lock him in their jails. In Moscow, he escaped from a Siberian prison transport van, claiming that had he been unable to free himself, he would have had to travel all the way to Siberia. From Bedford Court Mansions, we make a short journey onto Bloomsbury Street and then south to Great Russell Street. And it's here that we find the British Museum. Here's our route from Cheney's Mews to Keppel Street, Bedford Avenue, and then to Great Russell Street. The British Museum is a public institution dedicated to human history, art and culture. Its collection includes over 8 million works. Established in 1753, it was the first public national museum in the world. Up until 1973, it also housed the British Library. Given that many of its artefacts were collected during the era of the British Empire, the museum is not free of controversy. It is the current home to a number of objects whose ownership is disputed. These include the Elgin marbles of Greece and the Rosetta Stone of Egypt. The Rosetta Stone is a centerpiece of the museum's Egyptian collection. The stone was used to unlock the secret of Egyptian hieroglyphics. Understanding hieroglyphs was an important part of translating the Westcar papyrus, which can be found in the Museum of Berlin. The Westcar papyrus is an ancient Egyptian text from 2700 BC. It contains 5 stories about miracles performed by priests and magicians. The 4th story tells of a fictional magician. This is the first magician mentioned in history. In the story, Dedi is a common townsman of extraordinary age. He's said to have had magical powers. His bag of tricks included amazing restoration feats with animals and predictions. Dedi was described as being 110 years old and being able to eat 500 loaves of bread, a shoulder of beef, and drink 100 jars of beer every day. Wonderful credentials, you would think, to join the magic circle today. Dedi was apparently able to reattach severed heads back onto animals. He could tame lions, having them follow him around. And he was said to know the number of secret rooms in the shrine of the Egyptian god Thoth, a location that Pharaoh Khufu wanted to know. In the story, Dedi is invited by the Pharaoh's son to demonstrate magic. The Pharaoh offered a prisoner to be beheaded for the trick, but Dedi refused to perform using a person. Instead, he decapitated a goose, placing its head at the eastern side of the Great Hall and its body at the western side. At Dedi's secret spell, the head and the body of the goose waddled together to the middle of the room and melted back together. This act was then repeated with a water bird and then with a bull. Dedi made predictions about future pharaohs and even offered to alter the depth of the water in a canal for the pharaoh. Dedi was rewarded a new home in the pharaoh's palace and a daily allowance of 1,000 loaves of bread, 100 jars of beer, and 100 bundles of field garlic. While there's no archaeological or historic evidence that Dedi existed, his magic tricks are the first written accounts of magic. And while much of his magic is fantastic, many of his tricks would have been achievable. So if you've ever been asked what's the oldest trick in the book, you can legitimately say it was pulling the head of a bird and restoring it. You often see Dedi spelled D-E-D-I, but in some texts the Latin form is spelled D-J-E-D-I, perhaps sounding a little bit more like Jedi than Dedi. Perhaps we'll have to ask George Lucas, the inventor of Star Wars, whether Dedi may have influenced the creation of the famous space wizards, the Jedi. Another magical artefact to be found here at the British Museum is John Dee's spirit mirror. John Dee was an English mathematician, astronomer, alchemist, occultist and magician. He was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. It's also said that he was the inspiration for Shakespeare's magician Prospero. Both Dee and the fictional Prospero were users and abusers of magical powers. They represent a potential conflict between their secret studies and their more worldly political ends. They continue to inspire debate between theurgy, or white magic used for good, and guity, or black magic used for dark purposes. Amongst various other supposedly magical items, Dee owned a black spirit mirror. This polished stone was used to carry out occult research into the world of spirits. It's made of obsidian, volcanic glass, and was brought from Mexico to Europe between 1527 and 1530. Mirrors were used by Aztec priests to conjure visions and make prophecies. A number of other John Dee artefacts are housed here, including a rock crystal ball, 2 wax discs engraved with magical figures and names, and a gold engraved disc. Directly opposite the British Museum at 51 Great Russell Street is the Starbucks coffee shop. But from 1962 to 1984, this used to be Davenports Magic Shop. Starting out life in 1898, Davenports has had many locations across London, including Mile End, Charing Cross Road, New Oxford Street, and most recently, Charing Cross Underground. Within the world of magic, Davenports is an institution. It's the longest running family magic business in the world. It's no surprise, therefore, that many great magicians have a strong connection with the store. There were those who shopped here and those who demonstrated the latest magic tricks here. One of the most famous demonstrators, or Dems, was the great Patrick Page. Patrick Page, born in 1929, was a stage magician and magic consultant from Dundee, Scotland. He became a professional performer at the age of 26 and worked at Davenports for 15 years. He appeared on the Paul Daniels Magic Show, but also advised on a vast number of magic effects in TV and movies, including the children's show Whizbit, Derren Brown's TV shows, the 2007 movie Magicians, and was even a consultant to the 1960s James Bond movie Casino Royale. I was recently talking to Pat's daughter, and she told me that the American actor and magician and the big baddie in the movie Casino Royale was something of a hero to Pat. Unfortunately, Orson Welles was not the politest person, and I think Pat was disappointed at how rude Welles was. And it got to the point where Pat, who's one of those people who'd speak his mind, had to ask the softer spoken magic consultant Ali Bongo to be the main point of contact with Orson Welles. He was known for his work on numerous tricks, including the Miser's Dream, the Top It, and the Kitson Miracle. He was a prolific magic author and published several DVDs. In the magic community, he was regarded as a magician's magician. I actually have a memory of myself and Jonathan Goodwin approaching Pat Page at a magic convention, and we asked him a very obscure question about a magic trick that involved foreign language newspapers. And Pat was just incredible because he was able to tell us the name of the creator, the name of the trick, the year it was manufactured, and he pointed out that it would be almost impossible for us to get hold of it. And it turned out he was spot on all counts. One famous magician to regularly visit Davenports was the comedy great Tommy Cooper. He'd often come into the shop in search of the latest trick. But while Cooper was a famous celebrity, one soon-to-be TV star got his start in magic right here. Wayne Dobson is an English magician who rose to fame in the 1980s and 1990s. Wayne was born in Leicester and developed an interest in magic at an early age. His interest seems to have stemmed from seeing a children's entertainer and watching David Nixon on TV. When he was 9, his parents gave him a David Nixon magic set as a Christmas present. One year, Wayne took part in a school trip visit to the British Museum. It was on that fateful trip that he discovered Davenports right here on Great Russell Street. During his teenage years, he would return to learn more about the world of professional magic. At the age of 16, Wayne became the youngest ever member of the Leicester Magic Circle, and he started to pick up work at local clubs. In 1977, he won joint first prize in the close-up competition at the International Brotherhood of Magicians British Ring Convention, which led to his TV debut on BBC's Blue Peter programme. At the age of 21, he became a full-time professional magician. His style used fast-talking patter, one-liners, and dazzling sleight of hand. He would open for acts including Freddie Starr, Shirley Bassey, and The Shadows. He performed at the 1989 Royal Variety Show at the London Palladium with an act assisted by boxing legend Frank Bruno and commentator Harry Carpenter. A regular guest spot on the Joe Longthorne TV show led to Wayne's own TV series, Wayne Dobson, A Kind of Magic. I remember when this show first came out on ITV. For most of the 80s, TV magic in the UK was almost exclusively Paul Daniels. The show itself started in 1990, and Wayne represented a younger generation and a different approach to magic. In his series, he worked with the model Linda Lusardi, and rather than her being the one who gets sawn in half or levitated, quite often the magic itself would happen to Wayne, and this represented a step change to the more traditional stage and TV magic of the 1980s. Wayne worked with Ringo Rabbit, a comedic puppet companion, and developed various personas including Sam Shovel, a magical gumshoe character. At its peak, Wayne's TV show had an audience of 11 million. In total, 3 series would be commissioned. Wayne was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1988. While the illness has impacted on Wayne's mobility, he still continues to perform magic and work with a range of magicians. At the 2020 Blackpool Magic Convention, Wayne even levitated over the audience at the gala show. In 2021, Wayne was made an honorary vice president of the Magic Circle. Wayne Dobson is also an ambassador for the Multiple Sclerosis Resource Centre, the MSRC charity, and their details can be found at this address. Now, from the site of Davenports, we start our journey eastward. We're going to head to Bloomsbury Square, and then we're going to go southeast along the square to Bloomsbury Way. Here, at the southeast corner of the square, we find the London Cabaret Club. The London Cabaret Club is a modern venue that has been used by Magic Circle member Andrew Eborn to stage magic events with a wide range of magicians performing. We now head eastward, crossing Southampton Row, and then onto Theobald's Road. Then we're going to take a right and head on to Red Lion Square. And down here, this is where we find Conway Hall. And let's take a look at our route here on the map. Conway Hall is the home of the Ethical Society, the oldest surviving free thought organisation in the world. It now advocates secular humanism, and the hall often hosts lectures on rationalism. Magicians and mentalists have a long and rich history of supporting rationalist thinking by debunking fraudulent claims of paranormal ability. The psychology and deceit used by magicians to amaze and entertain has a number of parallels with the manipulation and fraud used by those purporting to have psychic or other supernatural abilities. In his classic Renaissance text, The Discovery of Witchcraft in 1584, Reginald Scott set out to demonstrate that witchcraft was mere trickery. He was sceptical about superstition and wanted to show that witchcraft and magic were rejected by both reason and religion, and that spiritualistic manifestations were either willful frauds or else illusions caused by mental illness. He consulted 212 authors with works in Latin and 23 who wrote in English. He also studied the superstitions related to witchcraft in courts of law in county districts, where women were being prosecuted as witches. His book is often cited as a key example of rationalism. He was described by one commentator as an independent-minded country gentleman, used to making decisions on his own initiative and in evaluating what he read against what he observed. As well as being a renowned escapologist, in later years, Harry Houdini was famous for debunking fake mediums who claimed they could commune with his dead mother. He even worked with the American Society for Psychical Research, offering a reward for any psychic who could demonstrate actual paranormal ability. One of my favourite Houdini stories occurred in 1923 when Scientific American, a leading magazine, promised $2,500 to anyone who would come forward with a genuine demonstration of psychic abilities. Houdini added a further $5,000 of his own to the offer, bringing the total amount to $7,500, which is around $126,000 or £100,000 in modern money. Which incidentally is about the price of a first edition of Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft. Houdini was joined by 3 other investigators, and they formed a committee to look into various psychic claims. During this period, Houdini was engaged in a vaudeville tour, and while he was away, he received news that the other members of the committee had indeed met a genuine psychic and were about to pay out the reward. Naturally, Houdini headed straight back and demanded to know what proof had been offered. The purported psychic was an Italian named Nino Pecoraro, and he had performed a séance where objects would move in a darkened room while he was securely tied with 70 feet of rope. Quite what Houdini thought at the time is not recorded, but it was clear that he knew the longer the rope, the easier it was to escape. So he arranged for another séance, but this time the psychic was secured with short pieces of fishing line. The lights were turned out, and what followed was 30 minutes of absolutely nothing happening. No doubt followed by the money being returned to the safe. But as we've heard, Houdini didn't always work alone. One of his key associates in investigating fraudulent psychic mediums was the curious and wonderfully eccentric Rose Mackenberg, or Mac to her friends. Mackenberg was born in 1892 and started out working in a law office. Through working on a case involving investment losses that had been advised by a psychic, she came into contact with Houdini, and the two began working together in the mid-1920s. She became an expert in the tricks and cons used by psychics. When Houdini went on tour, Mackenberg would often precede him by up to 10 days and work undercover, investigating local spiritualists and mediums. She and other covert investigators would often use disguises and false names, sometimes containing puns like Francis Raud or F. Raud, fraud, or Alicia Bunk, all is a bunk. Rose would sometimes even wear a hearing aid as part of her disguises. In fact, you can see some of the disguises she adopted while investigating psychics, from the rustic schoolteacher and the small-town matron to the semi-invalid and even the tipsy consultant. She would investigate over 1,000 mediums, exposing them all. Despite Rose Mackenberg being single, these fraudulent psychics claimed to communicate with over 36 non-existent deceased husbands. A number of prominent magicians and mentalists have lectured here at Conway Hall, including Professor Richard Wiseman, Paul Zenon, Ian Rowland and James Randi. James Randi, or the Amazing Randi, was a Canadian-American stage magician born in 1928. He began his career as a magician and escapologist, but in later life he dedicated himself to investigating claims of the paranormal, the occult, or the supernatural, or as he would call it, woo-woo. He was a regular guest on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson and famously exposed the fraudulent faith healer Peter Popoff, as well as Uri Geller. Randi set up a $1 million paranormal challenge where he would offer $1 million to anyone who could demonstrate any evidence of paranormal, supernatural or occult power. The reward was famously left unclaimed. Ian Rowland, a consultant corporate speaker, writer for hire and Magic Circle member, is author of one of the best books on cold reading, a technique used by fraudulent psychics. He's also an advisor to a range of organisations, including the FBI. As a teenager in Blackpool, Paul Zenon, a British TV magician and skeptic, learnt various techniques that psychics use and went on to perform tarot and palm reading across Europe. Such skills make him well placed to understand the deception used by psychics. Paul would upset so-called psychic Sally Morgan when he pointed out in a Daily Mail article that she wore an earpiece, potentially allowing her to receive illicit information. This resulted in Psychic Sally successfully suing the Daily Mail for £120,000, although subsequently various images of her wearing an earpiece have appeared online. In a legal battle between a psychic and the Daily Mail, it does seem somewhat unfair that they can't both lose. Richard Wiseman is Professor of Public Understanding of Psychology at the University of Hertfordshire. He's written several best-selling books on psychology and runs the Quirkology channel on YouTube. He's a fellow for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry and a patron of Humanists UK. He's also a magician and a member of the Magic Circle. He has studied the principles of luck, noting that in one experiment, people who thought of themselves as being lucky were more likely to notice an advert in a newspaper telling them to claim money from the experimenter than people who identified as unlucky. He also led Laugh Lab, where he helped to identify the world's funniest joke. The world's funniest joke, incidentally, is: two hunters are out in the woods when one of them collapses. He doesn't seem to be breathing and his eyes are glazed. The other guy whips out his phone and calls the emergency services. He gasps, "My friend is dead, what can I do?" The operator says, "Calm down, I can help. First, let's make sure he's dead." There's silence, and then a gunshot's heard. Back on the phone, the guy says, "Okay, now what do I do?" Richard has also co-authored a book on magic theory. We now head from Red Lion Square Gardens to Princeton Street, and then right onto Red Lion Street, and right onto Sandland Street, and then right into Hand Court. So let's take a look at the map from Red Lion Square Gardens to Hand Court. This location was referred to in the short Dr. Thorndyke mystery story, The Magic Casket by R. Austin Freeman. Bob Reed opted to include Hand Court in his tour notes because it was here, at number 9, that De Witt, the magic dealer, operated. While I found out little about the magic dealer, I do know that there was a special postmark that was devised to celebrate the centenary of the Magic Circle in 2005. Interestingly, number 9 Hand Court seems to have been the location of publisher G.W. Dorrington in the late 1860s. Dorrington produced handbills and posters, including this one, of John Henry Anderson's seances. We now continue along Hand Court, and then we're going to turn left into Chancery Lane, and we continue along until we get to Holborn Circus. Now today this is quite a busy intersection with lots of modern buildings, but behind me you can see Sir Christopher Wren's St Andrew's Church. This medieval church survived the Great Fire of London in 1666, but it was in need of repair, so Sir Christopher Wren rebuilt it. But we're interested in one of the church's former neighbours. If we turn around, you can see this modern building. So today we've got a branch of Boots in the office block. This used to be the department store Gamages. Gamages opened in 1878 and operated until 1972. It took up most of the block and also had a successful mail order business. It was known for its hardware department, but also had a photographic department, camping, pets and sporting goods. But it was the toy department that was most impressive. The toy department boasted its very own magic dealership with its own magic demonstrators. These included the likes of Sean McAllister, who ran the magic department in the 20s, Harry Barron, who would go on to co-found the Kmart Magic Company and edit Magic Info in the 1970s and 1980s. Two other big names to work here were Will Goldston and Robert Harbin. Will Goldston, born in Liverpool in 1877, was a stage magician who became a magic dealer, publisher, agent and author. He became interested in magic at the age of 11 and made his professional debut at 16 using the stage name Carl Devo. His act focused on black art, using black paint and black backgrounds to conceal certain deceptive elements while showing other elements in bright colours. Goldston ran the Mahatma Magic Company in Liverpool with his brother in 1900, eventually selling it in 1904, along with the Magician magazine, to A.W. Gamages. He married Lee Holter in 1902, who performed as Lee Laurie and later as Le Devo. His career in the music halls ended around 1905 and he moved to London and took on the role of manager-buyer of Gamages' theatrical and entertainment department from 1905 to 1914. During this time, he edited the Magic Annual from 1907 to 1912, Magician Monthly from 1904 to 1913, and in 1912, Exclusive Magic Secrets. He was also a prolific producer of magic books, publishing over 30 titles from 1903 to 1942. Goldston was an early member of the Magic Circle. He became friends with Harry Houdini and Chung Ling Soo, amongst others. However, there were occasional issues with other magicians. He upset magicians by revealing their methods in his publications, allegedly without either permission or attribution, a major crime in the world of magic. In 1929, one Ned Williams worked in the magic department of Gamages. Edward Richard Charles Williams was born in Johannesburg, South Africa in 1909. He'd be better known by his stage name, Robert Harbin. He got interested in magic after an ex-serviceman appeared at the school with a magic show. Despite the show being described as rather poor, it seemed to have had a marked impact on Harbin. He moved to London aged 20 and began work at Gamages and performed in music hall under the name Ned Williams, the boy magician from South Africa. By 1932, he would be appearing in the Masculine's Mystery Magic Show in various London theatres. Harbin is notable in the world of magic for being one of the first illusionists to move from stage performing to television, appearing in the BBC TV show Variety in 1937. He was also well known for developing new tricks, including the neon light, Aztec lady, the blades of Opar, and Aunt Matilda's wardrobe. But he's best known for the modern classic, the zigzag illusion, an early version of which can be seen at the Magic Circle. He was a prodigious author of magic books, working with Eric C. Lewis, an exponent of origami, becoming the first president of the British Origami Society, and he even appeared in Cy Enfield's 1953 movie, The Limping Man. We now head straight up Hatton Garden, and then we're going to turn left onto Clerkenwell Road. And if you take a look on the route on the map, you can see how we get to Clerkenwell Road. Behind me, you can see one of the few remaining bricks and mortar magic stores left in central London. This is International Magic. International Magic is something of a magic institution in London. It's been running for over 60 years. It's a family business started by stage magician Ron Macmillan and is now run by his son and daughter. Like many magic stores, International Magic would rely on skilled magicians to demonstrate their wares. One famous face who would often work here is Jerry Sadowitz. Jerry Sadowitz, born in 1961, is an American-Scottish magician and stand-up comedian known for his ink-black brand of often controversial humour. He's well known for his often politically incorrect comedy, but he was recently voted in the top 100 greatest stand-up comedians. He's also known for being one of the world's most accomplished sleight-of-hand magicians. As a comedian, he was lumped in with the alternative comedy movement in the 1980s, but he fell out of favour with the left due to, according to one critic, a willingness to say the unsayable. As a magician, he's encouraged many new performers, including Derren Brown. Jerry's 2017 show title was quite telling about how he thinks about how he's perceived. It was called Comedian, Magician, Psychopath. We're now going to head west along Clerkenwell Road, and eventually it becomes Theobald's Road, and we're going to stop at number 57. This is home to a very different type of magic. This is the UK headquarters of Industrial Light and Magic, the groundbreaking movie special effects house that was set up by George Lucas when he made the science fiction classic Star Wars. Industrial Light and Magic was founded in May 1975 as a division of Lucasfilm. It's a visual effects company known for producing amazing cinematic magic for films like Indiana Jones, E.T., the Harry Potter movies, Jurassic Park, as well as 350 others. The company has proved groundbreaking in movie visual effects, using motion control cameras on Star Wars, Go Motion in The Empire Strikes Back, CGI graphics in Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, creating the first CGI character in Young Sherlock Holmes in 1985, developing a morphing sequence for the Warwick Davis film Willow in 1988, just to name a few. The logo of ILM makes a nod to traditional stage magic with its depiction of a top-hatted magician. We now go up Lamb's Conduit Street, and then we're going to go left onto Great Ormond Street, home to the world-famous hospital. Great Ormond Street Hospital, or GOSH, was founded as the Hospital for Sick Children on the 14th of February 1852 by Dr. Charles West. It was the first hospital to provide inpatient beds specifically for children. It started with just 10 beds but has grown into a world-famous institution. Two of its first patrons and fundraisers were Queen Victoria, thought to be a fan of magic, and Charles Dickens, an amateur magician. Inside the hospital grounds is a statue of Peter Pan, the magical boy who never grew old in the book by J.M. Barrie. In fact, Barrie gave the copyright of Peter Pan to the hospital. Of course, there are many links between magic and medicine. It's long been known that magic can be very effective in helping people to rehabilitate from illness or assist those with certain conditions to build new motor skills. Two important magic initiatives are David Copperfield's Project Magic and the UK's Breathe Magic. Project Magic is an innovative program that uses magic as a form of therapy for people with physical, psychological and social disabilities. The story goes that the world-famous magician David Copperfield received various letters from an aspiring magician who, based on the handwriting, David believed to be a school student. David later learned that this school student was in fact a young man in his 20s who was wheelchair-bound. The childlike handwriting was a result of his disability, but the man had developed so many other skills through his magic studies. This led to Copperfield's realization that magic could be used to inspire and help other people with disabilities. Project Magic started in 1981 as a way to help people with various disabilities and was formally endorsed by the American Occupational Therapy Association in 1982. Project Magic now operates in almost all of the US states as well as 30 other countries. As covered in Walking Tour number 4, there is also Breathe Magic, an innovative program in the UK that adapts magic tricks and performance skills into therapy for children. It helps children with motor disorders such as hemiplegia, and Magic Circle magicians teach the children magic tricks to help them with their coordination. You can donate to the charity here. While we're here, we should meet Martin Schapender. Martin Schapender was a Liverpudlian magician born in 1879. He was known as a clever sleight-of-hand artist who performed at the Egyptian Hall in its last season. Sadly, he died of meningitis just before he was due to marry. He was only 26 years old. His death triggered his friend Neil Weaver to establish a magic club, the Magic Circle. The club still honours Schapender with a regular award named in his honour. The Schapender Award is for services to the community using magic. In August 2023, it was awarded to Spread a Smile, a charity who brings joy and laughter to seriously ill children and their families through hospital visits, outings and events. They work with a team of magicians who come to hospitals to entertain youngsters and provide a little joy. They frequently work here at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and you can donate using the link below. So let's have a quick recap of our journey. We can see our route all the way to Great Ormond Street Hospital here. We now head back along Great Ormond Street, and we're going to go left onto Guildford Place and then right onto Guildford Street. And then along here, then it's right into Doughty Street, and this is where we find the Charles Dickens Museum. As mentioned earlier, the famous author Charles Dickens was also an amateur magician. Dickens became fascinated with magic in 1842 after watching the Viennese stage magician Ludwig Dobler at the St James Theatre. Dickens was so impressed he immediately purchased the conjurer's entire stock in trade, and he became an amateur magician. If you'd like to learn more about Dickens and his interest in magic, you can visit the museum or read this excellent book by Magic Circle member and magic historian Ian Keeble. So now we head back up Doughty Street and right onto Guildford Street, and then left onto Gray's Inn Road. And we head past St Andrew's Gardens, and we're going to keep going. It's a little bit of a route here. Just keep going a bit further along. And we keep going. And eventually we arrive at London's King's Cross station. Now on the map you can see our route from the Great Ormond Street Hospital here. From the Dickens Museum up the road to King's Cross station. The area of King's Cross is thought to have been the location of the legendary battle between Queen Boudicca of the Iceni and the Roman invaders in AD 61. Apparently the warrior queen is meant to be buried under platform 9. In a move to raise the reputation of the area, a statue of King George IV was erected at the crossroads in 1830. While the statue would be demolished 12 years later, the name King's Cross stuck. Between 1849 and 1852, the Great Northern Railway developed their London terminus in the area. King's Cross Station opened in 1852. King's Cross St Pancras is now the home to Eurostar, but it's also known for its magical connection to Harry Potter. In the Harry Potter novels, Harry and his friends are able to catch the Hogwarts Express from King's Cross at platform 9 3/4, which is almost the same location where Queen Boudicca was buried. Actually, when author J.K. Rowling wrote the books, she was not living in London at the time and admits to mixing up the stations. In one BBC interview, she states that she confused King's Cross with Euston. The idea of a magical platform that's accessible only to wizards and witches who travel through a brick wall has inspired science magician Matt Pritchard to create this absolutely amazing optical illusion. The Harry Potter books and movies deal with witchcraft and wizardry rather than conjuring, but there are clear connections between these two types of magic. Magician Paul Keeve was the magic advisor on the Harry Potter movies, even devising a way to make a real-life Marauders map which can be seen in the Magic Circle Museum. Paul taught magic and magic history to Harry Potter actor Daniel Radcliffe. Daniel's knowledge of magic history definitely comes across when he appeared on BBC's QI programme and was able to answer questions about Deddy. Another actor in the franchise who clearly knows a thing or two about magic is actor Warwick Davis. Davis played the character of Willow in the 1988 movie and the recent spin-off TV show. He received training for the movie from man of mystery David Burglass. Davis also included stage illusions in a Manchester pantomime that he directed. We now head along Euston Road, and we go past St Pancras Station, and we cross over Midland Road, and we eventually arrive at the British Library. The British Library holds a collection of over 200 million items, including books, manuscripts, newspaper archives and stamps. The oldest items stored here are Chinese oracle bones which date back to 1500 BC. Such bones would have been used for divination in ancient China. Questions would be engraved on the bones, then heat would be applied with metal sticks, causing the bones to crack. The library hosted a special exhibition focused on the magic of Harry Potter in 2017. This was its most popular exhibition, attracting 170,000 visitors between October 2017 and February 2018. The British Library was previously held at the British Museum, where we were at the beginning of our journey. Christopher Hutton went to the British Library for help during World War II. Christopher Hutton was known to his friends as Clutty. He was a soldier, airman, journalist and inventor. As a young man, he had challenged Houdini to escape from a wooden crate. Houdini won the challenge, but the experience would set Clutty on a road to being the greatest escapologist you've probably never heard of. During the Second World War, Clutty's experience with Houdini helped him to land a job with a secretive MI9 organisation. This was part of British intelligence and it specialised in assisting British servicemen and women to escape from Nazi-occupied Europe. Clutty's job was to devise escape equipment for the British military, and he started by going to the British Library to obtain every book on escapes and escapology. His arsenal of gadgets would put James Bond's Q to shame. Clutty invented silk maps that could be secreted inside playing cards, compasses that were fitted into buttons, hidden compartments in board games that were sent to prisoner of war camps, and reversible uniforms to disguise downed airmen. Clutty has been described as one of the most remarkable figures of the secret background of the war. From the library, we continue west along Euston Road, and this is where we find St Pancras Church. This is St Pancras Church, and there's a sculpture here by David Brewer-Weir, and the sculpture depicts a floating man, which seems quite magical to me. We're going to cross over Euston Road now to Euston Fire Station, and we go on up to Doric Way. Now let's take a look at the map and you can see the route to Doric Way. Doric Way is named after the Doric arch that used to sit in front of Euston Station. Drummond Street used to cross in front of Euston Station, as you can see in this photograph. The western part of the street still remains and is known for its curry houses. These are a regular haunt for magicians on a Monday night after a magic circle evening. The eastern part of Drummond Street, now Doric Way, where we're standing right now, is where we believe Houdini had a warehouse. In fact, magician Paul Zenon wandered around this area, looking at buildings and over walls to get any clues as to where Houdini might have had his warehouse. But it did feel best to move on when he realised he was inadvertently trying to peek over the wall of the local all-girls school. While Houdini would need a warehouse for his magic props, it's also possible he may have stored aviation equipment here. In 1909, Houdini became fascinated with aviation and purchased a 60 horsepower French Voisin biplane for $5,000. Naturally, being the self-publicist he was, he would have his name emblazoned on the wings. He made his first flight in Germany near Hamburg on the 26th of November 1909. It was said that he was only the 25th person ever to fly a plane. When he learnt that no one had yet made a successful flight in Australia, he saw an opportunity to get in the world record books. So he embarked on a tour of Australia with his aeroplane in tow. His first attempts to fly at Diggers Rest near Melbourne were hampered by bad weather, mechanical issues and one crash. Worse was the appearance of rival aviator Ralph C. Banks, who set up his new Wright Flyer on the same field. But on Friday 18th of March 1910 at around 8 in the morning, the weather cleared and Houdini took flight. Sure, it only lasted 1 minute and he only reached a height of 25 feet, but it was witnessed by at least 9 people, and Houdini is officially recognised as the first person to ever make a controlled flight in Australia. With historic hindsight, it is very amusing to hear that the world-famous escapologist and magician Harry Houdini, whose name has entered everyday usage, once stated that even if the world forgot Houdini the magician, it could never forget his accomplishments as a pioneer aviator. From Doric Way, we're now going to go back down Eversholt Street, and then we go onto Euston Road, and we continue west, and eventually we get to the Friends House. Friends House is a Grade 2 listed building completed in spring 1927. It includes a large auditorium known as the Large Meeting Room, a library, garden and courtyard. It's the home to the central offices of the Quakers in Britain. Quakerism is almost 400 years old. It grew out of Christianity, and its adherents believe that there's something transcendental and precious in every person. One famous British Quaker is magician Geoffrey Durham. Geoffrey Durham is a British comedy magician and actor known for many years as the Great Suprendo. He developed an interest in magic as a child, but that interest waned in his teens. He studied Spanish at Leeds University before working in theatre. His interest in magic rekindled when doing a show in Liverpool, and he decided to make a career of it. For 15 years, he presented a magic act as the wonderfully over-the-top Spanish magician, the Great Sorprendo. The Great Sorprendo was the sort of magician a Brit might meet on a package holiday to a resort hotel in Spain. The character was a massive success, leading to appearances on children's TV shows including Crackerjack. Even today, magic fans of a certain age will know the magic words piff paff poof. In 1990, after leaving Sorprendo behind, Geoffrey would be the amiable expert magician presenter of the groundbreaking Best of Magic TV show. He would become a regular contributor on Channel 4's Countdown, and his faultless newspaper tear would be featured on the 50 Greatest Magic Tricks TV show. For 22 years, he was married to the comedienne Victoria Wood. Geoffrey famously refused to join the magic circle until women were permitted to join. He's now a member of the Inner Magic Circle and was awarded the Masculine Award in 2002. In 1996, Geoffrey became a member of the Society of Friends, the Quakers. We continue further along Euston Road now, and we're going to turn down Gordon Street, and a little bit down here we find the Bloomsbury Theatre. The Bloomsbury Theatre is situated in a brutalist building. It's a modern theatre opened in 1968 as the Central Collegiate Building Auditorium. It was later renamed in 1982. In 1969, it was the location of the Magic Circle Christmas show. It would be the regular venue for this performance for the next 11 years. Bloomsbury Theatre is part of the University College London, and a short way down the street from here is the English department. One of its alumni is English movie director Christopher Nolan. He's written and directed numerous cleverly plotted action and science fiction movies, including The Prestige, which tells the story of two feuding magicians played by Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, based on the 1995 novel by Christopher Priest. Christopher Priest himself was influenced by H.G. Wells and was appointed Vice President of the International H.G. Wells Society. Christopher Nolan cites Star Wars as being one of his influences, and included a stop-motion animation homage to Star Wars in one of his early movies. Getting back to the Bloomsbury Theatre, over the years it's played host to world-famous singers and comedians. Of course, it's also had its fair share of magicians, such as Derren Brown. One show here was the Magic Spectacular, put on in June 2006. Its headline acts were Alfonso Rios, the comedian Tim Vine, Jonathan Goodwin, and Jessica Cornish, who would become the singer Jessie J. It was produced by Callum McGregor, and it also starred Tarek Knight, Kelvin Wilmoth, John Archer, and me. Yeah, it's my tour, I can put in what I like. Upcoming performers coming to this venue include Magical Bones in October 2023, a London illusionist and a breakdancer, and Pete Furman, a comedy magician, who will be here in February 2024. Now we head back to Euston Road, and we go left and we continue west and we come to the building right here. This is the Wellcome building. Wellcome is a global charity foundation that wants everyone to benefit from science's potential to improve health and save lives. From April to September 2019, Wellcome held an exhibition here called Smoke and Mirrors: The Psychology of Magic. The exhibition allowed visitors to explore how biases of perception and whether their senses can be hacked. It included spirit photography, magic props, and psychological experiments to see how magic works on and in the mind of the spectator. Artifacts displayed included the head of a gorilla costume worn by Derren Brown, Harry Houdini's bell box, Tommy Cooper's fez, Paul Daniels' soaring in half box, and Harry Price's ESP cards. There were also regular performances and input from magicians including Professor Richard Wiseman, Dr. Gustav Kuhn, and Dr. Will Houston. From here, we're going to cross Euston Road and we head to New Gower Street, and we find Speedy's Sandwich Bar and Cafe. You may well recognise this venue. That's because it stood in for Sherlock Holmes' home 221B Baker Street in the BBC show Sherlock. The real Baker Street is about half a mile west of here, which is too far for a real walking tour, but through the wonders of modern technology on a virtual tour, we can do this. Here we are at Baker Street Station, and you can see a statue of Sherlock Holmes. The real Baker Street is just around the corner. Let's go back to the map, and you can see from Doric Way we went to Friend's House, the Bloomsbury Theatre, the Wellcome Trust, then to Speedy's Cafe, and then we went all the way along here to Baker Street. Okay, I'm going to do a magic trick now. I'm going to make Sherlock Holmes' home disappear. 221B Baker Street doesn't exist. In fact, when the Sherlock Holmes stories were written, it didn't exist then either. Baker Street used to have numbers that ran from 1 to the 100s. There were no 200 or above numbers in Baker Street at the time the stories were written. It was a purely fictional address. At least it was then. In the 1930s, when the streets were renamed and rebuilt, 221 was added, but it was lumped together with a larger block of buildings. So if we move on here, you can see up here we have the Sherlock Holmes Museum. This is actually at number 239 Baker Street, not 221B. But the Royal Mail now delivers all mail to 221B to 239 Baker Street, because that's the museum's address. And the museum has special permission from the City of Westminster to bear the address 221B, despite being between 237 and 241. But what's any of this got to do with magic? Well, the author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, was friends with our old pal Harry Houdini, and one might expect the author of arch-rationalist Holmes to be a strong skeptic of the paranormal. But if you thought that, you'd be very, very wrong. The great author Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle was born in 1859 in Edinburgh, Scotland. From 1876 to 1881, Doyle studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh. While studying, he began writing short stories. He took work as a ship's doctor and set up a medical practice in Plymouth. Doyle was a staunch supporter of compulsory vaccination and wrote several articles advocating the practice and denouncing the views of anti-vaccinators, which again might suggest a matter-of-fact and scientific approach in the face of conspiracy and baseless opinions. After an attempt at studying in Germany to be an eye doctor, he set up a consulting room close to here at Upper Wimpole Street. Doyle struggled to publish his first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet, but it was eventually accepted on the 20th of November 1886, and it appeared a year later in Beeston's Christmas Annual. He would publish 56 short stories about Holmes, the last being published in 1927. Doyle had a long-standing interest in mystical subjects and remained fascinated by the idea of paranormal phenomena. In 1887, Doyle began a series of investigations into the possibility of psychic phenomena and attended about 20 seances, experiments in telepathy, and sittings with mediums. He eventually declared himself to be a spiritualist. In 1893, he joined the London-based Society for Psychical Research. The death of his son, brother, 2 brother-in-laws and 2 nephews in and immediately after World War I may have further strengthened his interest in contact with the dead. As we heard, P.T. Selbit would conduct a séance for him in 1919. Doyle believed that many cases of mental health issues were examples of spirit possession. He was taken in by the Cottingley Fairies hoax, where young girls took photos of line-drawn fairies claiming them to be real. Doyle also believed that his friend Harry Houdini had the power to dissipate through walls. Harry Houdini tried to explain to Doyle that such feats could be done with illusion and trickery. He even took it upon himself to demonstrate what could be done with trickery when Doyle visited him in New York. Houdini had Doyle leave the house to write a secret message on a piece of paper. When Doyle returned, Houdini picked up a cork ball with a spoon, dipped it in white ink, and then moved it to a blackboard that was suspended in the middle of the room. The ball immediately jumped onto the blackboard and without any apparent means moved about the board, writing out Doyle's message. Houdini stressed that while this illusion was far more impressive than anything a medium or psychic could achieve, it was all mere trickery. He tried to persuade Doyle not to endorse phenomena simply because Doyle couldn't think of an explanation himself. Unfortunately for Houdini, this approach didn't work, as Doyle simply refused to believe there had been a trick. Houdini became a prominent opponent of the spiritualist movement in the 1920s after the death of his mother. He insisted that spiritualist mediums employed trickery and consistently exposed them as frauds. These differences between Houdini and Doyle eventually led to a bitter public falling out between them. Doyle also had a falling out with the other Harry, Harry Price. In 1922, Harry Price accused spirit photographer William Hope of fraud. Doyle leapt to Hope's defence and even threatened to have Price evicted from the National Laboratory of Psychical Research, calling Price's writing about spiritualists sewage. Doyle led 84 members of the Society for Psychical Research to resign in protest. If you want to read more about Conan Doyle and Houdini, I highly recommend Bob Loomis's book, Houdini's Final Incredible Secret. Now, before we head back to New Gower Street, there are a couple of other points of note in this area. If we were to continue along Marylebone Road, we get to the Landmark Hotel. The Landmark Hotel was originally the Great Central Hotel. From 1935 to 1939, this was the headquarters of the Magic Circle. During the Second World War, the hotel became a debriefing centre for MI9, the UK's intelligence agency dedicated to supporting Allied forces escaping from Nazi-occupied Europe, which we heard about earlier at the British Library. It was here that Colditz escapee Airy Neve was debriefed. It was also here in 1908 that a welcome back from prison breakfast was hosted for the suffragettes on the day that Emmeline Pankhurst was released from Holloway Prison. Before we head back in the direction of New Gower Street, it would be remiss not to mention the world-famous Madame Tussauds. The Wax Museum was founded in 1835 by French wax sculptor Marie Tussaud. She originally learned her skills from a physician who was skilled in wax modelling when she was a child. By the age of 17, she was art tutor to Madame Elizabeth, sister of King Louis XVI of France. Tussaud was imprisoned for 3 months during the French Revolution, during which time she made models of many prominent victims. The museum was originally located on Baker Street, but moved to its current location in 1884. It's been a major tourist attraction since the Victorian era. Madame Tussaud would tour Europe with a collection of wax models. She arrived in London in 1802 to display her models at the Lyceum Theatre. Unable to return to France due to the Napoleonic Wars, she travelled throughout the UK and set up her famous museum in Baker Street. The location of Madame Tussauds and the adjoining planetarium was also a key location in the novel The Warlock Effect. This novel was written by Magic Circle members Andy Nyman and Jeremy Dyson and features a 1950s magician co-opted to work with British intelligence. It's absolutely brilliant and definitely worth a read. We shall now nip back to New Gower Street. This way. And here we are. Now if we turn around, we find Stevenson Way behind me. And we're going to head in this direction and down Stevenson Way. And we find the headquarters of the Magic Circle, the Centre for the Magic Arts. Number 12, Stevenson Way, is the Centre for the Magic Arts, home and headquarters to the Magic Circle. We've just come from the Magic Circle's 1939 headquarters. And at the start of our journey, we visited Cheney's Mews at a time when women were still not allowed to join the club. The Magic Circle moved from Cheney's Mews in 1988 to the Victory Service Club on Seymour Street near Marble Arch. Other than a brief stint at the Players Theatre from 1993 to 1994, the Victory Service Club would be the home of the Magic Circle until 1998, when the doors of the Centre for the Magic Arts finally opened. Finding a permanent home for British magic has proved a long journey. We are a growing society. Our clubroom is overcrowded. Small wonder we should dream of a fine building. In fact, a real club. Admittedly, the same thing has been dreamed before, but no concrete action has been taken until now. Personally, I think this is a dream we can convert into solid bricks and mortar. So wrote Magic Circle Secretary Victor Peacock. Alas, he wrote this in August 1938, when the club was still based at the Great Central Hotel, and it would take 60 years to fulfill the ambition. The Magic Circle Appeal was launched in 1989 with a special issue of the Magic Circular. Members were implored to give money towards the £500,000 target. The funds were intended to purchase a building and refurbish it. In the end, over 4 times that figure was required. President David Burglas, supported by Michael Bailey and Lord John Macgregor, initiated an application for a grant from the Foundation for Sport and the Arts. A grant of £250,000 was issued. Lottery funds of £475,000 were also awarded, thanks in no small part to the tireless work of Rupert Connell. The freehold in the building, a dilapidated Victorian warehouse, was purchased on the 24th of April 1994. The building did not have sufficient floor space, so extra footage had to be added by extending the second and third floor forward to the original building line of the property. New stairs and a lift were required. Walls needed to be demolished, steel framework had to be incorporated, disabled access was needed and toilets too. All in all, it took £2.1 million and 14 months before the keys were handed over. The exterior of the building is evocative of the Egyptian Hall, the famous 18th century magic venue that was on Piccadilly. By the time the building was opened, women were allowed to join the club, and in 2021, Megan Swan became the first female and the youngest member to become president of the Magic Circle. She follows in the footsteps of David Devant, Neville Maskelyne, Clive Maskelyne, Herbert J. Collins, Lord Ampthill, the Duke of Somerset, Francis White, David Burglas, Michael Bailey, Alan Shaxson, Ali Bongo, Jack Delvin, Scott Penrose and Noel Britton. Megan Swan stood down as president in September 2023. She's succeeded by Marvin Burglas. So there you have it. Our 7th and final tour of magical London is finished, and let's take a look at our route. We started out at Tottenham Court Road, then headed to the Magic Circle's Cheney Mews HQ and learned about how women tried to join the Magic Circle. Then we met Harry Price and heard about things that go bump in the night. We also met Harry Houdini at the start of his career. Then it was on to the British Museum to hear about the oldest trick in the book, across the road to Davenports, then on to Conway Hall, home of rational thinking, a trip to Gamages, then to International Magic, a proper bricks and mortar magic shop. Then a stop at Industrial Light and Magic before heading to Great Ormond Street Hospital. A quick stop with Charles Dickens, then on to Kings Cross Station and its links to Harry Potter. Then a stop at the British Library before heading along Euston Road. We visited Houdini's warehouse and friend's house and the Bloomsbury Theatre. Then a quick detour to Baker Street to learn about Houdini and Conan Doyle, a short stay at the Great Central Hotel, a visit to Madame Tussauds, and then finally we arrived at the headquarters of the Magic Circle, the Centre for the Magic Arts. Thanks so much for joining me on this virtual walking tour and the previous ones. It's been quite a ride making these. I started out making virtual walking tours during the COVID lockdowns when I couldn't go out and about. Obviously now we can, and that changes things a lot. Thank you very much for joining me. That's it for these. The 7 tours are all now available online, and hopefully I'll get to see you in real life, and maybe we'll get to do one of these tours in real life. And that's probably a good time now for me to say goodbye.